Today I'm going to show you how to set up the Canon 70D for shooting high quality video. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when shooting video on the Canon 70D is to actually take the toggle switch and put it on video mode. So after you've switched your Canon 70D into video mode, the most important thing you want to do is set it to manual on the dial. So take the dial and turn it to manual. Any of the other settings on the dial besides M for manual will actually make the camera function in auto mode, and you don't want that. So the first thing we want to decide is resolution and frame rate. I would go ahead and go into 1920 by 1080 at 24 frames a second. However, on the Canon 70D, we want to decide between using all-eye compression and IPB compression. Now, I don't notice a lot of difference in IPB versus all-eye when it comes to the video quality, the way it looks, but you're supposed to be able to color grade and color correct a little easier with all-eye. So the decision comes down to how much space can you afford on your card. If you want the highest quality possible, you'll want to go with all-eye, and that will give you obviously less video you can fit onto one card. So that's just a decision to make for yourself. So since we're shooting at 24 frames a second, we'll use the 180-degree rule in filmmaking, and that just tells us to double our shutter speed of whatever our frame rate is. So in this case, on a Canon camera, we're going to use 1/50th of a second because it is as close to double, which would be 1/48th, as we can get, and that'll work just fine. So the aperture is one of those things that you can change. The shutter speed and the frame rate is something that will stay constant for the most part unless you're doing something more advanced. In this case, I'm actually shooting at 5.0. I have one big softbox here. So the aperture is at 5.0, and that's going to keep my entire face in focus. And you can see the background is a little out of focus. So that actually works really good for this setup. You'll have to adjust it based on your lighting conditions, whether you need it to be a higher number, which it would be darker, basically the image would be darker, or a smaller number. That would give you much more light into the camera. And another factor in that is ISO. So in this case, you're seeing me shoot at 320 ISO. I like to start at 100. Again, if I'm outside, inside I'll start at 160, go to 320, 640, and if I can prevent going above 800, I'll stop at 800. I like to shoot no higher than 640 if possible, but these cameras do fairly well at higher ISOs, so you can go up as you need. And again, having a lens that gives you a larger aperture will help keep your ISO down. So when we actually go into the menus, there is a couple settings you'll want to adjust for getting a really high quality image. The first one is going to be Auto Lighting Optimizer, and I go ahead and I just turn this off. It's actually disabled in manual mode by default. You can turn it back on by unchecking the disable checkbox, but I go ahead and just leave it off because we don't want the camera doing anything automatically while we're in the middle of a shot. I don't want it to adjust its settings after I've already set it up. The same goes for highlight tone priority. I set that to off as well because while it might help a little bit with the highlights, giving you a little bit more dynamic range, it'll also make more noise in the darker parts of your image. So again, I don't want the camera deciding any settings for me, so I go ahead and I turn both of those off. The Canon 70D gives you several options in white balance, and that's really good. You want to set that correctly, get it as close as possible when you shoot. I usually make a little bit of corrections when I get it in post-production, but you want to set it up for your lighting conditions the best possible. So you can do that manually with the K value. You can dial it in. Sometimes it helps to put it on auto white balance, see what it looks like, and then go over to the K value, which is kelvins, and dial it in something close to what auto is showing you. Another great feature that the Canon 70D gives us, which is actually a pro feature, I would consider it pro, is white balance shift. So if you're in a situation where you're using lights like fluorescent lights or in a room with fluorescent lights and it is shifting green, so you have a color cast that is green, you can go into this and shift the color balance. In that case, it would be towards magenta, and you could take out that green. So if you're in a challenging environment, you can make some additional adjustments via the white balance shift. Now, hopefully you won't have to do that, but it's nice to have that kind of control. After that, we do have manual control over our audio. So if you are using a microphone that is connected to the camera, you want to go ahead and set those up properly with the manual controls and leave it on manual so the audio is the best that you can get it. So it all depends on what kind of mic you have attached to your camera, but go ahead and set those via the manual controls on the audio. And the amazing thing about the 70D is that it keeps the audio meters on the screen at all times. So that really allows you to see your levels. Like in a situation where I'm sitting here recording myself, I can see the audio levels and I can make sure that A, I'm actually getting audio, and B, the levels are good while I'm recording. You can easily go ahead and adjust those on the touch screen as well. So picture profile is going to be something else you want to set up. It's mostly a personal setting, but for me, I like to do neutral and then dial those down, or even standard and dial those down. That is kind of what I call raise way, but that's my own personal way of doing it, and you can choose whatever picture profile fits the look that you're going for. When you're adjusting the aperture, you'll use the dial on the back to actually do that. And for shutter speed, you'll use the dial on the top. If for some reason you can't adjust the aperture, it's not working, then make sure that the little lock toggle switch is actually off. It's not locked, because that will lock your aperture in place. Another important thing to note with the Canon 70D is the Wi-Fi needs to be off in video mode. So make sure you turn the Wi-Fi off or it won't work in video mode. Another setting you'll want to have off is the digital zoom. The 70D does something neat, letting you zoom basically digitally 3 to 10 times. The 3 times looks okay, but you definitely want to turn that off. You can easily turn that on the quick menu on the screen, on the touch display, if that's something you need. I have shot at 3 times, it looks okay, but you're going to lose resolution. So for the highest quality, don't shoot in the digital zoom mode. And the 70D obviously adds a new awesome feature, is a touch screen. So you can use the touch screen to go through your menus. You can use the touch screen to adjust your focus. Basically, the whole camera pretty much operates off the touch screen if you want it to. Now, there are some deeper menus to go into that we have talked about in this video that aren't available via the touch screen, but for the most part, you can use the touch screen to go through all the settings that we've talked about and things you're going to want to use while you're shooting. You can easily turn off the AI servo, which is the continuous autofocus on the 70D, and you can get to all the quick functions on the touch screen itself. So those are the core menu items and settings that you're going to want to use on the 70D when you want to shoot high quality video with this thing. And again, make sure it's in manual mode. Set your frames per second. Just go with 24. You can get a little smoother motion out of 30 frames. And if you want to do slow motion, that would be 60 frames. And then you would adjust your shutter accordingly, basically just double the shutter speed and leave it there according to your frame rate. But I would go ahead and use 24 and then use 1/50th of a second, and then use your ISO, the lowest possible, and then adjust your aperture to get the correct exposure, right? So if you have to go all the way down to 2.0, realize that things are going to be more blurry, less things are going to be in focus. So if you need more things in focus, you want to use a higher aperture number and adjust your ISO up the scale, like 320, 640, or 800 to get the proper exposure. You just need to adjust those two things, and the relationship to each other just depends on how much you want in focus and the compromise you want to make for the noise in your video with the ISO. So adjust those based on your lighting conditions. All right, I will see you next time. Today we're going to take a look at the Canon 70D video, specifically the video. Today I'm going to show you good enough. Complete. Today we're going to look at, today I'm going to show